Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today, I will table our government's 2022 budget, Ontario's plan to build. You know, after 2 long years where the people of Ontario have worked so hard and sacrificed so much to keep each other safe, after working so hard to get Ontario open and keep Ontario open, les Ontariennes et les Ontariens méritent un gouvernement qui a un vrai plan pour bâtir l'avenir de la province. The people of our province deserve a government that has a real plan to build. Our budget is a plan for rebuilding our economy with better jobs and bigger paychecks. A plan that is working for workers to give them the skills that they need to succeed for an in-demand and well-paying jobs. A plan for building highways and key infrastructure to get commuters out of gridlock and home to their families. A plan for keeping costs down by putting more money in the pockets of Ontario families. And a plan to stay open with more hospitals, more beds, more nurses, and better home care. This is a plan that says yes, a plan that looks into the future with confidence and optimism. We have a real plan that is working, and we are ready to get it done for the people of Ontario. C'est notre plan pour passer à l'action. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
So we'll just go to the floor. One question, one follow-up.
Bonjour, Monsieur le ministre. On va commencer en français, si ça ne vous dérange pas. Natacha, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour.
Il y a 4 ans, vous promettiez de couper dans les dépenses. Là, aujourd'hui, vous allez dépenser beaucoup plus. Ne craignez-vous pas de mettre en colère votre base électorale, les gens qui vous ont élus?
Pas du tout. Merci pour la question. Le budget de 2022 propose un plan pour meilleur emploi et de meilleurs salaires, un plan pour bâtir plus de logements en route, d'hôpitaux et infrastructures et de transport en commun. Alors, je crois que c'est un plan pour tout Ontario. C'est un plan qui bâtir pour l'avenir. C'est un plan pour les travailleurs, les travailleuses. Et c'est notre plan pour l'Ontario. Et avec le Premier ministre Ford et moi-même et tout le gouvernement, on va passer à l'action.
Votre gouvernement promet d'améliorer et d'élargir les services en français dans la province, mais il n'y a pas de nouvel argent dans le budget pour faire ça. Combien ça va coûter? Est-ce que c'est des promesses en l'air?
Au contraire, il y a plus d'argent pour tous les francophones, franco-ontariennes et ontariennes. Et en plus, je suis fier de ça. On a plus d'écoles français partout à l'Ontario. Chez moi, à Pickering, il y a beaucoup plus on a bâti des écoles, augmenter l'espace pour les étudiants français. Alors, il y a beaucoup dans ce budget, il y a beaucoup qu'on a fait pendant les derniers 4 ans pour tous les Ontariens, aussi même les Franco-Ontariennes. Merci.
Hi, Minister.
Hi.
We understand that this budget is not going to be passed, so it's essentially going to stand as an election platform. But as far as platforms go, it's kind of short on goodies, on pocketbook promises. Will there be more rolled out during the campaign, more promises, particularly on affordability?
Well, you know what this is? This is a plan to rebuild our economy. This is a plan that will get better jobs and bigger paychecks in Ontario. This is a plan that we've announced today, building $158 billion of capital to build highways, to build infrastructure. And of course, we're supporting workers and working for workers, so putting more money into skilled trades and skills and retraining so the workers of Ontario can succeed. And I think that we are also helping Ontarians in a time of rising prices, bringing costs down, putting more money in their pockets. So I think this is a big budget that's got a whole bunch of things to move forward. It's a plan. It's Premier Ford's plan. And you know what? We're getting it done.
All right. So since the first pandemic budget, we've seen that you've actually managed to chip away at the deficit, and it's been declining. That is until next year, it looks like, where it's going to go up by quite a bit. Why have you decided to go down that route, to veer off your path to balance and plunge us more into the red rather than sort of staying on track to balance? We know the FAO said it could have been done by next year.
Well, the good news is that, in fact, our debt to GDP is down 800 points, 8%. Our commitment to balance the budget is going to happen 2 years faster than we said last year. Our deficit's down meaningfully, but most importantly, so this is a plan that rebuilds Ontario's economy. You know, we've got to get people working. You know, the previous government, the Liberal government, we saw 300,000 manufacturing jobs leave this province. You know, those were jobs in Oshawa, in Windsor, in Oakville. We're bringing back those jobs, $12 billion of investment over the last 18 months, going into 2,600 jobs in Oshawa, 2,500 jobs in Windsor, 5 electric vehicle lines in Oakville. So this is an ambitious plan that invests in the people of Ontario, invests in infrastructure, builds hospitals and builds roads and builds public transit and subways so that we can get Ontario rebuilt, and we're very much not only getting it done now, but we're getting it to get done for the future.
Hello, Minister. The budget projects that the number of homes that are going to be built in Ontario is going to decrease by almost 13,000, and again, a few thousand more than the year after. Why is that happening? I thought this government's plan was to build more houses, not fewer.
It is our plan to build more houses. In fact, we've set a target of 1.5 million new homes over the next 10 years. You know, I would say that under our Minister Steve Clark, who's put in 2 bills already to make it faster and make it easier to build, that's what people want. It's a supply issue. In fact, we've put in some of the conditions that we saw the largest amount of homes built in 2021 since 1987. You know, that's almost 35 years. But clearly, we have a plan to cut red tape and permitting, and we're going to get the houses built, and we have a plan to do it.
I didn't hear an explanation of why it's falling now, but I will ask another question. I would like to know what the Ontario Loan Act is and what's in it.
The Ontario Loan Act is part of the legislation that we have to put in place. It's one of the legislative changes that we've put in place. We've got a number of legislative changes, and part of advancing the economy, advancing, you know, for example, the auto sector, being able to provide more choice and fairness in the auto sector. We're putting things like Ontario Venture. We're calling it Venture Ontario. We're changing the name, Invest Ontario. So there's a bunch of legislative changes that have to be put in this document that we're going to advance. And it's all for the purpose of moving our economy forward, building that economy that I've talked about. You know, we had an environment where things weren't being built. You know, we didn't build subways, we didn't build hospitals, previous government didn't build long-term care homes. Doug Ford, since day one, has been building infrastructure, has been building highways, building long-term care, and that's what this plan is about.
Hey, Minister, what's going on with the $1.3 billion cut to education from last year?
So I got to tell you, you know, I don't know if you look at the document, if I had the budget here, I'd be waving at you because you'd see that it was $5 billion, almost $6 billion more than it was under the last year of the Kathleen Wynne government. We've put more money into funding per student. We've put more money in mental health, more money in schools, money for tutoring. We've put HEPA filters in the schools. So what I see is a big increase in funding. In fact, the grant for student needs, the funding for pupils is going up by $600 million. And you know what's important about that? We've enhanced the curriculum so that we've put science and technology and math and coding and financial literacy to prepare our students for the jobs of tomorrow. There are more jobs than there are workers, and so part of our education strategy is to build our children to have the skills that they need for the jobs that are there. They're good-paying jobs, they're bigger paychecks, they're secure jobs, and I'm very proud of what we've done in the education sector.
Okay, I didn't actually hear an explanation of the $1.3 billion, but my next question is, are we ever going to see the middle-class tax cut?
Well, what you've seen is us bring costs down on many fronts. Today, you've seen in this budget what we've announced is that a lower income tax break for those making $50,000 or less is part of our plan. We've given the license plate stickers. You know, the previous Liberal government, they just added the fees every year. In fact, Stephen Del Duca increased it while he was Minister of Transportation. So we're getting rid of those costs. That's like an immediate tax cut. Of course, the gas tax is going to drop on July 1st, 5.7 cents for 6 months. So we're putting more money back in the people's pockets of Ontario, and we're keeping costs down.
Hi, Minister. Mike Crowley from CBC. You got elected on a promise to rein in government spending, and I don't see a word in here about reining in government spending. So is it an acknowledgement that maybe you were wrong with that approach and that actually what people needed was more investment in government services?
We've got it right. We've got the balance right. I believe, we went through 2 years of a pandemic where we spared no expense to protect the people's health of Ontario. We're coming out of that. Where our deficits have been coming down. As I mentioned, the debt to GDP is coming down. We're balancing 2 years quicker, but we're being, I think, very prudent to invest in healthcare and education and critical infrastructure, because as I said, we have to rebuild this economy. We have to grow those jobs. We need those bigger paychecks. That's what people of Ontario want. We've got to build that infrastructure. If I look at just my riding of Pickering, 0 long-term care beds were built for 7 years. Before we took over. In Ajax, right next door, the Liberals, supported by the NDP, built 0 beds in an environment we had a waiting list of 38,000. Premier Ford said, we got to get shovels in the ground. We put one in Ajax, the Ajax Pickering Hospital in January of 2021. I cut the ribbon 13 months later, 320 beds versus 0. So we're building infrastructure, we're getting it done, and that's our plan.
Okay, so maybe if you could explain why you campaigned so hard on this idea that government was spending too much money in 2018. Was that not correct?
Well, clearly the pandemic, Mike, has exposed some of the lack of investment by, I'm going to be very blunt, by the Liberals, supported by the NDP over the last, they had 15 years to get these things done. Instead, what they did is they talked about it, they had more committees, they had more studies. How many long-term care beds did they build? How many new hospitals did they build? How many subways did they get built? How many manufacturing jobs went vamoose out of the province? They're coming back. We're getting shovels in the ground. And I was just near Scarborough at Shepherd and Cowan, and you see that subway drilling that's going on. They talked about it since the 80s, and now Doug Ford is getting it done.
Hey, Peter. Will you promise on behalf of your party that you will introduce the same budget after the election that you've presented to us today?
Well, what I will commit to the people of Ontario, that this is our plan. This is the budget that we're tabling, and we'll get the people of Ontario to vote on that budget, and I have full confidence in the people of Ontario that they will pass this budget. And so we're looking for that mandate from the people. We're being very transparent and accountable by putting forward a fully costed plan for all to see, and I'll stand behind that budget.
But when you say that you're confident in the people of Ontario voting for the budget, does that mean that if they do vote for your party with this budget, you will then return in government and introduce this same budget? It's a fairly straightforward question.
Well, I'll give you a very straightforward answer. Please. We're rebuilding Ontario's economy after 2 years of the pandemic. We're creating good jobs and bigger paychecks. That's what we're standing behind. We're building the infrastructure and the highways that I just talked about. We're getting 1 million people every 5 years to the Greater Golden Horseshoe. 2 million over the next 10 years. We've got to build highways. We've got to build subways and public transit, a record amount of public transit. And what's really, I think, important as well as part of our plan is including all of Ontario, the critical minerals in the far north and the Ring of Fire, where we don't have to go to China. We don't have to go to Russia. Right here in Ontario, in northern Ontario, we can bring prosperity to the north, get the critical minerals that will go into the batteries that are manufactured here in Ontario at the new Windsor plant that was just announced, and we're going to put them in the electric vehicles that we're going to produce and hit targets, significant targets of manufacturing electric vehicles. So we've got a plan, and we're going to get it done, and we're going to go to the people of Ontario to get it passed.
I'll take that as a no then, that it's not a promise.
Hi, Minister. I was hoping to talk to you a little bit about the environment and the role that plays in the budget. So in past years, the government has had an environment chapter or a section. There's been a little bit of mention of the environment plan or new measures. Not a lot of emissions reduction or even new initiatives in this on the environment. What are we to make of that? How does the environment fall as a priority for your government?
Well, we've laid it out in the budget. Actually, we're building good green jobs in all of Ontario. Starting, as I just mentioned, with the the critical minerals in the north, the lithium, the graphite, the cobalt, the that has to go into these lithium-ion batteries, shipping them down into the south where we can build those batteries and then put them into the electric vehicles. That is our green plan. You know, we've invested into Fasco in Hamilton to convert to green energy, green, clean steel. It's also happening in Sault Ste. Marie at the Algoma Steel Plant. So we're making those types of investments right across the province where we're going to have a good, clean, green jobs, and that's our vision. That will help with emissions. And as the Premier said, you know, you'll choose in a number of years between buying an electric vehicle and an electric vehicle. They're going to be made here in Ontario by Ontario workers, and I think that's a very clear plan. And you know what? We're going to deliver and get it done.
I understand that, Minister. There's not a lot that's new, though. So I'm wondering, why isn't the government pursuing any new concrete emissions reduction policies that haven't already been announced?
What's new is the $12 billion of investments in those electric vehicle hybrid manufacturing plants. Tell that to the 2,600 workers in Oshawa that now have a job come back to Ontario, back to Oshawa. That's meaningful for the families and the communities there. They'll get bigger paychecks. They'll get steady jobs and better jobs. Tell that to the families in Windsor that saw all those jobs leave for years after years with the previous government who just let those jobs go. You know, we're building clean electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. We're going to lead North America. We're investing in nuclear energy because it's clean, it's safe, it's good technology so that we can have a clean grid. 94% of Ontario's electricity is fueled by low or zero carbon emission generation capacity. So I would say we're investing in the people of Ontario and the workers. We're investing in rebuilding this economy, and we're going to have the infrastructure investment that will really boost Ontario.
Minister, just about the timing of this budget. Your government made a big deal, it wasn't you, it was one of your predecessors, of saying we're going to have a deadline on the budget, and if we don't meet that deadline, March 31st, we're going to pay 10% of our salaries. You guys had to pass a bill to eliminate that deadline in order to delay this budget. And I think some people here might ask, why'd you bother? There's not really much new in this budget. What was the purpose of that, other than to use it as an election ploy?
No, Jeff, there's lots that's new. It's a $158 billion capital plan. You know, we wanted to take the time in a very uncertain environment with the Russia-Ukraine situation. Clearly, the supply chain impacts, the environment that we were in. We're just coming at, you know, we've had 2 years of the pandemic. So we wanted to be very thoughtful and deliberate about the plan that we've tabled today. A plan, as I said, rebuilds the economy, Ontario's economy, you know, gets those good-paying jobs, the bigger paychecks. A plan that keeps Ontario open, invests in hospital and infrastructure and beds and more nurses and personal support workers. We're going to invest in infrastructure to build those subways that I talked about. You know, getting a plan that the people of Ontario can vote on and decide on, and I'm looking forward to the people of Ontario passing our budget.
Given your background, you know, you downgraded Ontario when you're with DBRS and the financial crisis. Looking at the books now, looking at what the FAO said, looking at what some other financial analysts have said, there's plenty of fiscal room to balance that budget earlier. The deficits before the date you say you're going to balance it, 27, 28, pretty small. Why not show people that this is a government that cares about getting its fiscal state of affairs in order and balance those books before the next election instead of 2 elections away? You
know, for 15 years, the previous government talked about doing things. They did studies, they did committees, they created task force. You know, how many subways were built? As I mentioned, how many long-term care beds were built? How many new hospitals were built? How many highways were built? You know, it's a time to get things done. It's a time to rebuild Ontario. You know, this is our blueprint coming out of a 2 years of pandemic to make sure that we stay open, that we prosper and provide good paying jobs, bigger paychecks and good jobs for all Ontarians. And we're going to get it done.
Next question. Yeah. So I just heard you say that you want to include all of Ontario in your budget. And I'm wondering, you know, with the tens of billions of dollars spent in public transportation, how come you're not mentioning anything about funding maybe the 3rd phase of the Ottawa LRT?
Well, you know what, we're building that public transit, $62 billion. We're building highways, $25 billion. We announced in the budget, we're announcing announced today $40 billion. That's a record investment in
But nothing
hospitals.
for Ottawa.
And we invested in the Ottawa Hospital. We're investing in the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. We continue to support Ottawa and infrastructure right across. We're widening the 401 from Pickering all the way to Brockville, so we can move people, stop being in gridlock. That's why we're building the 413 and the Bradford bypass. We're losing $11 billion of productivity just in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. We're building infrastructure right around the province, and that includes Ottawa. And we're getting those shovels in the ground, and we're getting it done.
Yes or no, or oui or no, both, doesn't matter. If your government comes back after June 2nd, is this very specific budget going to be reintroduced exactly the same way?
We're going to listen to the people of Ontario, but this is the plan that we want to put forth in front of the people of Ontario. The people of Ontario will vote on this budget, and it will be up to them if they want to pass this budget.
Hi, Minister, but that doesn't really quite answer the question. So can you give us a yes or no answer? If you are re-elected, will the Ontario Progressive Conservative Government reintroduce the exact same document as we have it today?
Well, we are going to campaign on this document, Colin.
It's a yes or no.
In your mind, it may be a yes or no. Events, we're going to go through an election. We're going to listen to the people of Ontario. This is our plan that we've tabled. This is our plan to rebuild the economy, and this is our plan to get those good jobs. We've got a demonstrated track record of getting things done, Colin, and we're going to listen to the people, and we're going to get this done.
Okay, so it is subject to change. Okay, follow up. In 2018, you had written an op-ed, and you said, quote, "Fixing Ontario's balance sheet is what keeps me up at night. With respect, you look well-rested." So what do you think 2018 Peter Bethlenfalvy would say to 2022 Peter Bethlenfalvy, who's now spending billions of dollars and running deficits to do it?
Watch out, Peter, because there's a pandemic coming, and the previous government didn't invest in the infrastructure. Seriously, we had some of the lowest beds in all of the OECD countries per capita. We had not enough long-term care beds, not enough nurses, not enough personal support workers. So the Peter Bethlenfalvy in 2018 would have said, the investments that the Liberals didn't make when they had the time over 15 years to do, we're going to get done. And we started doing that as soon as we got elected. The Peter Bethlenfalvy of today would say sparing no expense during the pandemic was the right thing to do. Rebuilding Ontario's economy today is the right thing to do in a fiscally responsible way, which we demonstrated in this budget.
Thank you. The next question will be the last question. Hi, Minister. If you're so comfortable running deficits for the next few years, how do you say no to funding things that have been rejected in this budget? Why is there not greater spending in education, not a raise in ODSP rates? How do you justify that, considering you are going into deficit for many years?
Let me be crystal clear. We're investing a huge amount more in education and have been throughout. There's no question about that. We're investing more in social services. And in fact, over the last 3 years, starting in the pandemic in 2020, we've invested over $3 billion through the Social Services Relief Fund, providing more housing and affordable housing and supports for the most vulnerable and homeless in society. So, that's a commitment that we'll continue to follow through with. And I believe that we found the right balance to invest in Ontario, to build things, get good jobs and support the workers, rebuild this economy, all in the context of a fiscally responsible plan, which I'll remind everyone is balancing 2 years faster than even a year ago.
How do you said you're campaigning on this document. How do you assure people that you're not going to use this document to get elected and then come back in the fall with an entirely different document and change some of the promises you've made here?
We've made, well, in terms of, what's the alternative? 15 years of not doing anything, talking about things and not getting things done, versus a government that has a demonstrated track record of getting things done. Building a subway, you've seen since the 80s talk to build a subway to Scarborough, stranding 700,000 people. Getting that started now in the first mandate with federal government support, municipal support, provincial support, Premier Doug Ford has been able to do that. And also the Shepherd extension, which we've announced today, to be able to link the new Scarborough subway and bring the Shepherd extension subway to connect it, is just evidence of the ability for us to have a plan, to execute that plan, and get it done.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.